We are live.
Yes, we are.
Good morning, people. We are going to do a joint video today, myself and Nick here. And without any ado at all, I'm going to introduce you to Nicholas Michaelides, who is a practitioner in the field of coaching, hypnotherapy, regression, and NLP. And so he does soul work. He's also studied Reiki. So he has a beautifully complex dream catcher of skills to work with. And he wants to blow the doors off this shadow thing. And we don't know where this is going to go, but we're going to just get into shadow and see where it takes us. So good morning, Nick. How are you?
Good, Chrissy. How are you?
Wonderful.
So I guess you introduced me. I should introduce you.
Go for it.
So this is Chrissy Sawyer. And I mean, the word that comes up most strongly for you is mystic, because there is something very mystical and mysterious about you. And I feel as you've been doing more of these YouTube videos, you've kind of been shifting and taking on more and more. There's more coming in. But I've certainly, in the space that we've shared together, I've often found myself in, let's say, more of a client place where I've been challenged and invited to, let's say, change my perspective. And I hope in some ways that I've done the same to you. But yeah, it's been an interesting, it feels like we're playing ping pong, but neither one of us wants to win. You know, it's just like a nice exchange. God, what a strange analogy. My neighbour's just got ping pong tables. I think it's like programming me subconsciously.
Back and forth of exploration. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, so I'd really like to, just because it's kind of the notes part and that's quite cognitive, but I'd really like to just share what came in with me this morning. Okay, so this morning I'm with lyrics, and I've woken up with the lyrics of 3 songs. And so the first one is Parliament. I'm a huge fan. And it's the first lyric that goes, tear the roof off the mother sucker. Okay, tear the roof off. Second one, Flashlight. Everybody's got a little light under the sun. And the third one is Art Garfunkel, Bright Eyes, burning like fire. How can the light that burned so brightly suddenly burn so pale? So that's really what wants to speak into today's field. There's more stuff. Carl Jung was banging my door down and he wants to just drop a few quotes in, and 4 cards have already come out and they'll come in when they come in. So, and then this morning, while I was doing my bun, I asked myself, what is shadow? What is shadow to me? And this gentle masculine voice came in and said, my shadow is the part of me that gets eclipsed when my ego looks you in the eye and tells you I'm fine.
One more time.
My shadow is the part of me that gets eclipsed when my ego looks you in the eye and tells you I'm fine. And that really sat well. That really sat well. So for me, that can be not wanting to tell you that today I'm a mess because, insert reasons here, because I'm a practitioner, because I should know better, because of my fear of judgment, and or it can be the part of me that hides the mystic. It's taken me 6 years since leaving the day job to become this, by, you know, just gently kind of cracking that door and taking a peek out and waiting for fire. And when there's no arrows coming, then just coming out a little bit more. Until now, it's just like, yeah, I'm really cool. I'm really cool with it. So that was all my shadow. That was all the me that I kept hidden at the back of the cave.
I'm intrigued, actually. As you're talking, I notice I'm going into trance, and I'm wondering who or what is coming in.
Okay. What if we let go of who or what and welcome it? And welcome the gentle trance-like state and be in the feminine mystery. May is resounding with 13s all over the place, and 13 is divine feminine. You know, it's the fire coming into the blueprint. Okay, I have a little something activating in the solar plexus, just a little something activating in the solar plexus.
And I've got something in the heart, just on the left of the chakra.
Okay.
Really pulling across the chest.
Which way? Pulling left?
Pulling left, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Very tender, whatever it is.
And my crown is it's kind of here. It's really, really opened up. I sense there's lots that wants to be said around this. All is not as it seems. Running from your shadow is like running away from a pot of gold. It is a foolish behavior born of ego and fear and guilt and shame and sorrow and loss. It is the expectation that you will be slain and damned to hell. It keeps you small. It is the lack of joyful wonder, hopeless, abandonment of ego of the child. It's that hopeless joy that prevents us from sprinting forward into the unknown and wallowing in the mystery of life, letting go of trying to figure it all out. Ooh, thank you.
I think that really connects to what you were saying before, that definition of the shadow, that it's the bit that gets eclipsed when we say we're fine. And it's funny how, well, certainly in the UK, I don't know about other parts of the world, you know, someone says, how are you? It's not really how are you. It's just another way of saying hi. And you expect, you know, just a fine or good in reply. But by going for that safe response, we're basically turning our back on ourselves. I just also want to add that whilst you were just channeling that bit, I noticed how my forehead was getting very heavy and I was starting to lean forwards. I noticed how ungrounded I was. I made a point of putting my feet on the floor and grounding. And then, and still now, my left leg is very tense to the point it's lifting off the floor. And it's very hard to focus on you. Your face keeps morphing. And I notice I'm fighting it.
Yeah. I appreciate your honesty. Nick,
If we don't have our honesty, what do we have? That's what I say.
Absolutely, you know, and I've known Nick a wee while, and he's really good at, he does this process where he'll paint himself into a corner, and, and then he'll call his own BS, and then he'll go in and extricate himself. It's a beautiful process. Yeah. Wow. It's the most beautiful energy with me, and there doesn't feel an ounce of shadow about it. It feels, it's just taken my eye right up to this beautiful gull that's flying over the house as we speak, with the sunlight just bouncing off it. It needn't be dark and heavy, is what they're saying. It can be a joyful, playful experience as we learn to dance with our darkness and entwine, showing me that the double helix, entwine with our shadow. Because when we keep reaching for the light, you know, this is the idealistic self. We keep reaching for the light. We want to be whatever these number prefix dimensions are. I don't understand what 5D means. Nobody's presented me with the science of it. I don't understand what 6, 7, 8, 9D means. I could Google it, but again, it's all subjective. So let's imagine, I know I bridge worlds, and I know I visit different dimensions, and what I don't do is get lost in defining it, because who knows? But it's playful up there. It's really playful, and the feet can come off the ground, and we have to be mindful that we live in a physical body that we need to love and own cell deep, with all its marks and its lumps and its bumps. That's the physical expression of us, and when we're here and fully embodied and fully loving everything here, then flight becomes easier somehow. It's like it's the whole pandemic thing. It's finding our way home, and many people haven't even got the key to their own front door to come home to self, which is why they're reaching out all the time for that external meaning, external purpose, external validation, when all they need is to come home, because blueprint's in here. So it's the balance, isn't it? It's the balance of the light and the dark. I think I said about 3 videos ago, the sun card keeps coming out in the readings, and whatever the sun hits, it casts a shadow. It casts a shadow, it lights us up, and we can energize ourselves from the energy of the sun. There's a shadow behind us, and are we brave enough to just turn around, take a peek at what that is? Yeah, emerging.
There's something really nice about that, and it's a process I've tried before. You know, you're talking about facing the sun and having the shadow behind us. Excuse me, and this idea of bravery to turn around, but sometimes it's really just so nice to have the sun on your back. And so instead of focusing on what it's like to face the shadow, just focus on what it's like to have the sun on your back. And it's actually very warm and comforting. And then within that warmth and comfort, you don't necessarily notice the shadow the same way. It takes on like a softness, if anything. I guess in a way it's a bit like a child, you know, when a child sees its shadow and it starts moving arms and kind of drawing in a way with its shadow.
Yeah,
it's a bit like that. It does become more playful.
Yeah, I like that. I like that as an analogy, is to play. If we have the sun on our back, then our shadow is before us, and it's easier to dance with, isn't it, when you can see your partner? That's lovely. That's really lovely. Wow.
You know, this morning, it's funny, I didn't know why I was thinking about this morning, but I used to be scared of the dark, you know, many kids are, right? But there was something very specific in that in order to counter that fear of the dark, my parents installed little night lights. And so in some ways, they very much helped. But in another way, they started casting shadows everywhere. And then you'd start, well, I would start seeing shapes within those shadows. So I remember one night I got up in the middle of the night and I went onto the landing on my way to the bathroom, and there was this a silhouette of a head, and I froze, and I was there for probably a couple of minutes before I realized it was the shadow of the banister being cast against the wall. But you know, for a, let's say, 8-year-old at the time, it was I was stopped in my tracks, and it was quite a nerve-wracking experience. So I don't know why I'm saying that, but as I said, it was something that popped into my awareness this morning, you know, quite randomly.
You just triggered something for me. Yeah, that. Yeah, I can see how that would have made an 8-year-old boy jolt. And sometimes we go back to a primeval response, don't we, to shadow? Like, you know, that old reptilian part of us that's waiting to be prey to some predator consciousness. And what you reminded me of, thanks for sharing that, when you're talking about the light casts the shadow. You reminded me of a dance I did with shadow a few years ago. And I was in bed journaling, and my eye caught the shadow. I think it was around Samhain, and I wanted to change the lighting. So before a certain hour and after a certain hour, it was candles only. I just wanted to experience what that kinesthetic light was like. And it took me into a different dimension, completely different. It was beautiful. Really opened up the creative, receptive part of me. And I noticed, so I had a great big bunch of lilies and candles, and my eye was taken up to the corner of the room, and I watched the shadows dancing, and I started to commune with them. And this beautiful blog post came out called The Mantis and the Crab. And those shadows taught me about a little conflict that was sitting within me. It was just exquisite. What a beautiful dance. I'll share the link to Mantis and the Crab. I'll also share the link to Nick's website. But that's a joyful dance with shadow. Yeah, it was lovely.
And what a magical time to experience that around Samhain.
Oh yeah, very powerful. So I remember Samhain 2016. I was blessed to do a workshop. It was a clay mask workshop with Body Soul Europe, who are affiliated to the Marion Woodman Foundation. So this is, it was a clay mask workshop to explore clay as a healing tool for PTSD. So I was there kind of in professional capacity. Never been in a room with 26 therapists before. That was an artful space. Wow. From all over the world they came, and we sat there, and I had deliberately gone completely unprepared. All I'd taken was what they asked me to take. And Marion Dunley, beautiful Irish woman who ran the 3-day workshop, went round robin to introduce us, and she said, she just pointed at me and she said, would you like to introduce yourself and tell me what your word is for this workshop? And I'm like, whoa. So I introduced myself, and this word resurrection went, but And I thought, right, okay, that's resurrection. And since that day, I arrived. That was, without shadow of a doubt, that's the most powerful workshop I've ever done, bar none. It was unbelievably powerful. Yeah, Samhain, Dance with Shadows. Ooh, nice.
Without a shadow of a doubt. That's an interesting term, isn't it?
Yeah, what do you take from that?
Well, again, going back to what you were saying right at the beginning about the shadow being eclipsed by the ego, and so it's almost, well, to be honest, I'll be honest, I don't really know what the shadow is. And on my path, I've been encouraged to embrace the light side and the dark side. And I guess somewhere in between the two is the shadow. But I mean, we were having a bit of a chat before we started recording, and I was saying that I think when a lot of people talk about the dark, they're either confusing it with their shadow, or they can't distinguish their shadow from their dark. But when we're talking about without shadow of a doubt, there's something about that part of us that doubts ourselves that creates the shadow. It's something within the absence of love, and within the absence of just recognizing ourselves fully, that from that grows this so-called shadow. Maybe I say that like it's, but I mean, I guess I'm feeling into it as I'm talking.
Can you explain to me your understanding of darkness?
So on a high level, it's everything which isn't acceptable.
Such as?
To you know, to close family, to people we grew up. I think parents possibly have, or have had, times may be changing, have had a bit of an aversion to the darker side of their children's character or personality. So it's the bit that the child would be told to suppress or to not do because it's bad or it's naughty, that kind of thing. But then I'm also thinking, for example, anger would be the darker side. Now, it's not necessarily the darker side, but it's certainly, if kept unchecked, it could lead into that darker side. And let's face it, there isn't a single thing that doesn't have a dark side. Even love, if pulled to the extreme, is going to have darkness. So I guess it's looking at things on a scale and looking at the opposites. So, for example, not that I want to get into judgmental terms, but good and bad,
yeah,
and happy and sad, and all those things. Wherever you're in imbalance, wherever you tend more to the extreme. But you see, I guess this is where it gets a little bit complicated for me, because I think I tend more towards the dark than the light. And I know that I have that parental inner voice saying that's bad. But then I wonder, people who tend all the other way into the light, surely from a balance point of view, that's also not ideal. But no one tells them, oh, you're too happy. Stop it. Stop smiling. That kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know is the answer. And I think on my journey where I am right now, and as I'm developing as a practitioner, I think I'm very much in that space where I'm exploring all these things myself. Where the sweet spot is, where it's okay to be tending towards, again, judgmental, the negative side, but still be okay to hold it, and to hold the space around it, and to allow it to just be, because ultimately it's just a signal, a message on some level. So I don't know, that's fairly wishy-washy, going round and round, doing the spirograph.
In joke. Yeah, you've kind of just described, in a wishy-washy way, not really, my understanding of shadow. I think what you're bringing to it is like a graded scale. But your understanding of darkness is my understanding of shadow. It's the adaptation of the child. It's hidden magic. It's the part that we're scared shitless of.
So, as you say, scared shitless, I have a bit of resistance. For me, it doesn't necessarily feel like fear, but it does feel like I don't know how to interact with it, therefore I don't.
Oh, right, okay. So in some of the client work I've done, I've literally had the client begging me not to take them there, not realizing they're taking me. And I'm just pathfinding, and just walking slightly ahead with the lit torch so they can find their own way. So I guess there's a question of ownership in here as well. But yeah, and what I'm seeing most at the moment in respect of meeting our shadow self, integrating our shadow self, seems to be everything I'm doing is around the resurrection of the child. Maybe that's what I birthed in 2016 in time for now, because it feels like what's getting birthed on the planet is how can I exist without a blueprint? How can I exist outside the matrix in which I've grown up? Well, and then my common sense comes in and says, all you can throw at this is meaningless joy. Go play. And so I need my inner child to be able to play without meaning, to be able to play without structure, because we're building here. And if we reach for structures of the past, then all we're doing is rebuilding the old. We're not actually building the new. To be able to build the new, we have to sit in the mystery of the feminine. And that is going to kick up some shadow. That is going to kick up, first and foremost, loss of control, loss of knowing, loss of a structure, plan. And this is all fourth house. One of the cards this morning, fourth house, it's my roots, that's base chakra, planet-wide base chakra, which is being worked on for, oh crikey, to my knowledge, 3 weeks, a month now. It's the root chakra it's like shifting like tectonic plates, because that's what keeps us rooted to a paradigm that's no longer serving the collective. So yeah, what am I rooted into? What is my connection? What is my strongest connection might be an interesting question. And this was the first card. That's not those cards, is it? Bear with me. No, ignore me. The first card out was actually this. And that to me speaks right into what is shadow. It's the hard to find blessing. It's the part you put behind you when somebody pointed a finger at you. It's the little terrified child. It's the magical child, the gifted child. it's the shame of that humiliating mistake. It's the failure of that business and your whole family seeing it. It's everything that we don't own and love better, because we can love anything, you know. There are no parameters to love. It can love anything. It can love any depth of shadow. So, yeah, what I'm seeing at the moment in the system is the tearing down of our own edifice, the edifice of our own creation. You know, the shiny tooth, big grin photographs on the websites of millions of people, you know, and behind closed door. Are you that? Are you sure you're that? Are you telling me the truth? Because if I don't see your mess, how can I meet mine? It's why I say it's the child that raises the adult. The adult thinks it raises the child, but the adult shelters, feeds, waters, and disciplines generally. And when the child starts to form opinions and values and beliefs and perceptions, then the triggers start coming out in the adult. And if the adult would burn away their ego or allow the child to burn away the ego of self-protection that the adult has fostered, then the child has the power to transform that adult in making it face its own shadow. I once did a client session years ago where the gentleman I was working with was projecting all of his hatred onto his son. And I paused him and said, I'm really interested to hear that story. Perhaps you can tell me the story again, exactly the same way, but in the first person. I think he got about 2 sentences in. I fucking hate myself. I hate how I'm me, and I'm me. And the shoulders started going and the chuckle started building, and then this laughter erupted into tears and heartbreak for what he'd projected onto his boy, who he adored. It just couldn't get to the adoring because this shadow, you've probably heard of the projecting hand. You do a lot of systemic work. You know, this is what I call what the system calls the projecting hand, and the shadow that I can't meet, I'm going to project onto you. And that's what he was doing. So, you know, when you find yourself pointing a finger or using the word you a lot, you're projecting. So without judgment, because, you know, there's no right and wrong, there is only the experience. So without judgment, replay that story and tell it to yourself in the first person and just see where it lands. If it lands in you and triggers some kind of response, it's in you. It belongs to you. Own it. Process it. Love it. Oh, really powerful that was. Really powerful piece of work.
Are there times when people might point the finger and say you, but it's not about themselves?
I think it's the body that would tell me the truth on that. Because, yeah, I think there are genuinely times where, ow, you trod on my foot. That's a genuine you. You stole my money. That's a genuine you. Does that answer the question?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm thinking about a situation I have at the moment with some noisy neighbours.
Yeah.
And I've noticed how triggered I have been recently about it. And I've taken it very much as an invitation to look at my stuff and to see what my role is in, what my responsibility is, etc. But it's still, it lingers. It lingers, and it's you know, it'll creep into my mind, or I was going to say, or into my body, because I guess I'm holding on to it in my body in some way. Then I'm curious. I'm curious about that. I'm curious about what it says about me, or, you know, it could be that I'm just reading too much into the situation. sometimes stuff just happens. And I think maybe it could be one of the hazards of being a practitioner, that you start reading too much into everything. And maybe it's just, the natural ebb and flow of life. And sometimes we're challenged by certain individuals, and we just have to learn and grow and move on. But I think what I'm talking about is this maybe a sticking point, where that moving on isn't quite as straightforward. And so I'm trying to tie it back on some level to my exploration of light and dark and shadow.
Yeah.
And how it all fits together and how best to move through it.
With love. With love. As we love another, we love ourselves. As we love ourselves, we love another. As we love the cosmos, we love the earth. As we love the earth, we love the cosmos. We love. And I'm with you as a fellow practitioner. Like everything has meaning in my life. Everything has meaning. There's no such thing as coincidence.
There is no escape.
There's no escape. So for me, the truth is, the story is contained in my body is the blueprint, and it's also the betrayer. So if there's a genuine, if that were my neighbour, and it was me just kind of investigating and, as you, in your words, overthinking, then it probably wouldn't land with me. I would be coming at it from a point of professional curiosity. But if it's landed in me and if it's pulling at some trigger in me, then I've got to look at that and surrender to the knowing of that. And you'll know where you're going with this. If it's landing in an emotional, physical way, in a kinesthetic way, then have a look at it. See which part of you it resonates with, and then let it burn you to ashes.
Oh, it's already doing that. But it's funny that it came up now, because the neighbour actually just came down into the hallway, and I don't know if it was picked up by the mic, but it was quite noisy. Hopefully it wasn't. It didn't get picked up.
No, I didn't hear a thing. Maybe you're imagining it.
All of it. All of this is just a hologram.
It's just a projection.
I'm staring into the blankness of space right now.
Oh, carry on that vein. You're in my territory.
Well, actually, through one of my lines of work, I've been thinking about this idea of creating from the void. And I guess I was thinking about that a few minutes ago when you were talking about beliefs and thoughts and the structures that we've put in place. And something I've been exploring, I guess, on some level. This is rhetorical, by the way, so don't feel under pressure to answer it.
Okay.
But within all the beliefs and the thought patterns and the emotions, etc., that we have created over our lifetime, we get to the point where things are kind of preconditioned, right? So you get triggered by certain things, you move, say, emotionally or physically or mentally in a certain direction. Now, if you want to create from void, which is a much more magical place, it's a place that anything is possible. But then to get to that, do you need to release all your beliefs and your thoughts and your emotions, or do you embrace them so much that you know 100% where everything is and you can navigate it with your eyes closed?
Oh, God, that's like the best steak I've ever eaten. Oh.
So I guess in a way it's this idea of being entrained to the environment. And it's one of those paradoxes, just like, to explore your dark, you kind of have to go into your light and vice versa. It's very much to get into the create from void, to this openness where everything is possible. You have to get very deep into the limitations.
So Carl Jung says, the brighter the light, the deeper the darkness. This beautiful quote. May I share this quote?
Please do.
This is from Carl Jung's The Red Book. So this is basically the journey. Such a heavy book. I mean, it's a heavy book, full of shadow. So this is where he recorded his journeys with spirit, and talking into the ingrainment, what's ingrained within us. He says, but fundamentally, you are terrified of yourself, and therefore you prefer to run to all others rather than to yourself. I saw the mountain of the sacrifice, and the blood poured in streams from its side. When I saw how pride and power satisfied men, how beauty beamed from the eyes of women when great war broke out, I knew that mankind was on the way to self-sacrifice. I once did a speaker gig for an anxiety group. And part of how I was introduced was that I work with ex-military and PTSD. And over in the corner, so then I came on and I was introducing myself, and over in the corner, this woman started crying. So I paused the session, and I asked if she needed, what did she need? Did she need, some water or to leave the room? No, I'm fine. I'm going to stay here. Got her tissues out, and she's dabbing away at her eyes. And the person next to her was supporting her. And then there was this pause, and I said, do you want to speak into this? And she said, I just feel so guilty. Okay. About, well, they go, my throat chakra now is like, if it's feeling sick. Well, they go off to war and they sacrifice their life to keep us safe. And I went, no. I said, we're not doing that dance. We are not doing that dance. I said, I work with these boys, and there isn't one of those boys that would stand in front of you now and light up with pride at your overlaying of guilt onto him. I said, I'm hearing you use the word hero. Again, there's not a soldier I know that would define themselves as heroes. I said, these are professionally trained soldiers, and they take the Queen's shilling. That's their job. They chose it. So she moved through into this reframe, and I said, stay with the guilt. I said, isolate the guilt away from the soldier and explore that, because you might find great riches in where that guilt is truly coming from. So, and this is a whole culture, which I don't want to bring in, because it's, look at me, oh my God, don't make me do it.
Sounds like your chair has a lot to say as well.
My chair's getting old. This week it's like, what's wrong with you? Do you have arthritis? I think it needs some anti-inflammatories. So yeah, that, coming back to what you're sharing about, I've got this symbol now of this energy being woven so deep into the fabric of who we are. And it's that if-then negotiation. If I do this good thing, then I can have this. It's like being worthy of the void, being worthy of light, being worthy of light. So I woke up with a question. Well, I had it yesterday. I think I mentioned it to you the other day, because I saw this sentence that made me go, oh. And the sentence was something like, can we let go of our addiction to wounding? Now that's opened up a whole new gamut for me. But I'm straight in the void with that, the potential of that. I'm straight in the void. So what if I share that question with you? Where would you go with that? Well, question one, is it an addiction to wounding? Question two, does it need to be raised up and healed, or can we just leave it?
When you say it puts you in the void, do you mean it in the same way I used void, as in create from void, or do you mean in the void like a chasm?
Both.
Okay. Well, actually, I was just thinking how interesting if it is a void, like a dark place of nothingness. Well, that is the perfect place to create from. So I'd say you're probably in a good place, being
Oh,
in that void.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so the question, addicted to wounding, you know, yes and no. What I keep getting is a visual of some train tracks, and it's like we we get to a point in our lives where something is so ingrained that we forget we have choice.
Yes.
And some of it is you know, a habitual thing. It's just from experience. We've become a certain way, but it's also what we've taken on from our families, from our ancestors, um, from our teachers, from our mentors, from our parents. And I differentiate parents and ancestors, you know, because their parents are teaching you a specific way of how to be, I think, compared to ancestors, where that's more, I'm talking more about the epigenetics when I say ancestors. So I don't know if I would say it's an addiction, but there is definitely a habit to it. And there's definitely the subconscious or maybe unconscious process of falling back into habit. Well, habit resides within those places, I guess. But it's like, you know, you're going about your day, and then click of the fingers, something happens, and you're straight back into whatever happened before. And whether that's because whatever happened before wasn't resolved, or it's just, you see how I wouldn't call it an addiction, but it's an interesting idea because it's something very similar. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. And I think what I was also thinking about was this idea of, imagine you have a home, and right in the middle of that home is a column, right? And you think, you move into that home at first, or you know, when you're getting used to the space, you think, oh, that column's in a bit of an awkward place, I want to shift it. So you call your architect or your structural engineer or whoever you're supposed to call in those instances, and they say, well, actually, that's structural, you can't move it, and so it has to exist, and so you have to navigate the space. It goes back to what I was saying about the entrainment of your beliefs, your thoughts. You know, you just get 100% used to it being there so that you can then let it go. So this structural column right in the middle of your home, that for a while you'll not be used to it, and then you'll move into a space where you have to be used to it, and then you'll move into a place where you don't have to, you just are used to it. And then you might get to the point where you think, you know what, I can do something really pretty with that and hang some plants on it or something.
Yeah.
Or put some pictures or paint it a different color, make it a feature rather than an eyesore or an annoyance.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. What I had coming in while you were sharing that was part of that entrenched behavior is something I've spoken about recently, which is how we fill the gaps with ghouls. So when we arrive at a spot or a crossroads, let's call it a crossroads in our life, where our plan has gone, our spreadsheet got deleted, and we're looking into I don't know what. So we don't know what the possible outcomes are. We don't know what the possible investment is. And many of us fill that space with the worst possible expectation. Oh, it's just, you know, you hear people say, just my luck, that, you know, and that goes out on the mental plane, comes back in the physical, goes out on the mental, comes back in the physical. And it's like, you know, I often say to people, but What if a 75-foot cruiser lands out of that space and you can spend 6 months of the year on the sea, in the sunshine? What then? You know, you're going to get this range of don't be so stupid to oh yeah, how do I make that happen? And all the focus is directed at that. We've forgotten that we are manifestors. We've forgotten that we are the architect. We've forgotten that our whole life was created by us. And other people have come in, but it's my play. I'm the writer, director, and producer and casting director. I made it. And everything that leaves me pulls something back towards me. So if you ever want a snapshot of your life, then snapshot your group of friends, snapshot your environment, what meets you in the system. That's all a reflection of what you've built. Again, responsibility and ownership keeps coming back to responsibility and ownership. Sorry, being pointed back to these. Let me just see what these are. Shadow, okay, yeah. So the 4 cards that wanted to help with shadow are 4th house, base. What's hidden in the basement? Shadow, ally in disguise. Shadow, causes. Shift. And very often it causes a shift by removing the clothing of pretense, leaving us naked in the world. And it doesn't get more naked than the innocence and purity of a child. So here we have the rediscovery of that child essence. I tell you, if it were up to me, children would run the world. That would be an epic playground. That would be a playground par excellence. I'd want to be a part of that world. Have we done shadow?
I don't know. I just want to share something, because I was, as you were talking, so I'm just thinking about our ping pong game. So you talk and then something comes up. Anyway, I was thinking about a client session I was having the other day, and so my client said, I'm a bad father, I'm a bad husband, I'm a bad professional, and all these things. And I said, well, how do you know? And just on a very simple level, that person is not their own father, not their own husband, so they're not really in a position to judge. But it's interesting, the stories that we tell ourselves. And it was a slightly unusual case. I think this person was very sensitive, and I think they were probably picking up a lot of things from their environment, from other people, that was then making their energy very muddy, and was just coming out as a panic. It's almost as if the mud was getting deeper and deeper, and they were starting to sink in the mud.
Wow.
But it brings, I guess, almost another layer to what we're talking about. That if you're an empath, or if you're a sensitive person, and you start picking things up, then it does get a little bit more complicated, sifting through what's yours and what's not. So there's the invitation that if you do feel a bit overwhelmed at times, just to pause and to challenge things and say, well, is this thought that I'm having true? Does it have basis? And I mean, invariably it doesn't, because if you come up with a statement like, I'm a bad father, then that's possibly built on 1, 2, 3 experiences. It's not going to be every moment of every day. There are going to be times when there's going to be some good stuff. And I've kind of lost where I'm going with this. But I think that the reminders to challenge the thought, but also to say, well, is this mine? Or maybe even better, how much of this is actually mine? Because I mentioned very briefly epigenetics and things like that. Well, how much of that is the stuff that has been passed down? How much is the stuff that's been taught by a parent because of whatever issue they had and they didn't necessarily deal with, or they dealt with it by passing it on?
Yeah. Because there is a kind of a taking of the baton action here, where we propagate ancestor stories, and I wonder if there should be a ceremony for a point in a child's life, maybe that initiatic age 13 or something. I don't, it's just what I'm feeling, where they can commune with their ancestors and say, and thank them for the journey so far. However, this is where I walk my own path, and I will call you when I need you. But some of your fears I'm placing at your feet, and some of your limitations, which I have insight into, are not mine, and I don't wish to carry them forward. I think that could be a really powerful initiatic process for our young people to step into their confidence and into their own their self-worth in the world, and be unmanaged and unmitigated. Be unmanaged and unmitigated. Wow, that's a dangerous child.
I think there's a lot to be said for a ritual like that.
Do you?
I think there's definitely a value in having a space in your home to honor those that came before. So, say picture of parents or grandparents, whatever, having like I don't want to say an altar space because it implies something else, I think, but just a little place where you can remember. But I think as children are taught about their ancestors and previous generations, I think it's important to not paint them with what will be the best expression, not to see them through rose-tinted glasses. I think it's important to show the light and the dark. And I think that's really important, because then that allows ownership of both.
I love that you've said that. That's a really important value point. I remember working with a client a while ago who had an abusive father, and who was defending that abusive father, late abusive father. And what that was doing was detaching the client from their own pain through the filter of guilt. And I asked the client, it's quite blunt actually, I said, what am I looking at? And they said, what? I said, am I looking at the deification of the dead? And they burst laughing. They just burst out laughing. Yeah, he was a bastard. And that just released all the truth, beautiful, blunt, ugly. Oh God, we need to bring our ugly to the world. We really do. We need to bring our rolls of fat and our sagging skin and our ugly narrative into the world, because I'm tired of the shiny tooth, blank-eyed smiling face. I'm tired of that psychopathic, narcissistic face of pretension. I'm tired of it. I prefer the ugly and the disfigured. You know, and that's what we're being taken into. You know, this 2020 is triggering balance, the balance of the feminine within the masculine and the masculine within the feminine, and the holding of those two energies, and the cooperation and the collaboration of those two energies within the self is a game changer. It's ping pong. No one seeks the point. It's ping pong. That's it. Lovely. We just closed a circle there. Yeah. Ping pong in shadows. Yeah. It feels like it's drawing to an end.
Feels like a natural pause.
Yeah.
As we were saying a couple of weeks ago, the pause of the pregnancy.
That's amazing, because my sacral is filling up with energy. I'm getting the word more. There will be more. There will be more. Yeah, the pregnancy of the pause and the pause of the pregnancy. Yeah. The toil of the pregnancy. Oh man, yeah, beautiful. I thoroughly enjoyed that, Nick.
Always fun to riff.
Always fun to riff.
Even better to riff in good company.
Yeah, back at you. And to the village. I hope that we've brought something that strips shadow work, you know, down to its roots, literally, root chakra. And I hope that we've shone a light into the shadow to give it meaning and to actually give it a justifiable place in the world, an honoured, revered place in the world. So we're not to make the mistake here that it is only the light that we revere. It's important that we revere the darkness because it contains our magic, you know. Okay.
And I feel compelled just very quickly to say to the village, if you have any questions or you feel that you have any curiosities about the shadow that you feel that Chrissy could explore more. So the invitation for Chrissy to also, I don't want to say step up because I think you've been doing plenty of that, but to go deeper.
Yeah.
Bring it. Let's do it. Well, we said we were going to blow the bloody doors off, and it feels this was nice. It does feel like it was opening the doors. And I'm not saying that we should blow the bloody doors off, but let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'm really willing to do that. That sounds like rich work.
Of course you are.
Yeah.
You know, actually, I just have to add something else. So we've been talking about shadow, and I've been looking at your cardigan, which is very black, but then at certain times you've got whatever's behind you on the chair, it's got like little feathers coming up. So it's almost like from the shadow you've been sprouting feathers from those shadows, taking flight.
Oh, I like that.
Very crow-like.
Oh, brilliant. So, thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, it's been amazing. And I hope there will be more.
Take care, Chrissy.
You too.
See ya.
Bye-bye.